This is David Tulis, and I'm your host here at 92.7 FM, 95.3 HD4. We are high definition. That is to say, we are on a platform, FM platform, which is digital, which is very, very powerful. Reach is 65 miles out. You can hear all of our fine shows, whether it's Bloomberg, Power and Policy, and Politics show at 1, or our Bloomberg Markets show at 2, or Sean Hannity, the great analyst out of the National Affair at 3. We are Nooga Radio, and I'm on every morning at 9 o'clock, and I'm grateful for management for giving me just a couple hours of your time. But all I really want, I would suggest, are 5 minutes. Just give me 5 minutes. And maybe at the end of that spell, you'll think like I do, and you'll want to love your neighbor and buy local. That is kind of our theme here. Localism, Noogacentrism. I'm the blogger with the biggest pen, as Dave Crockett said. He and I are arguing. We're arguing who is the number one Noogacentrist in Chattanooga. He says it's him. And when he's in the room, standing 2 inches taller than I, he's 6'5". I yield, and so I'm the Noogacentrist number one since he's not here, and would appreciate your moment's attention. There's an event Saturday I wanted to mention to you at Memorial Auditorium. It is a celebration of the Reformation 500 years ago. The doors open at 6 and it starts at 7. $25 a person to get in for an adult. There's a teenage rate, and then if you have a student rate, it's $15. I'm sorry, $10 on the student rate. It's at the Memorial Auditorium, a celebration of the Reformation. Some beautiful music from Keith and Kristen Getty will be there as well. The Reformation, of which we are heir here in Tennessee and Chattanooga, gave us from at the hand of Samuel Rutherford, whose books at one time would bring the death penalty if they were found in your hand. The leading volume he had was Lex Rex, and that simply means the law is king. Lex is law, Rex is king. Lex Rex, the law is king. And in our day, as in the 1500s, the thing was reversed. And American progressivism, our Republican Party, our Todd Gardenhires and Joe McCormick's all argue that Rex Lex is true. In other words, not that the law is king, but that the king is law. That is effectively what Republicans and Democrats today argue. Even on the city council, you have Republicans who will say one thing. I heard gushing commentary from a Republican council member. I think he's Republican, a council member at the Sheriff Jim Hammond event last week. And yet I've consistently pointed out that he and his colleagues passed an unconstitutional ordinance. Do they not care for the people enough to avoid passing an unconstitutional ordinance? That was the Airbnb short-term vacation rental ordinance. Not Lex Rex in their minds, but Rex Lex. The king is law, right? Rex is the king, Lex is law. Rex Lex is the progressive theory, the Republican and Democrat progressive theory that even conservatives, who are a schizophrenic bunch for sure, would agree with. But the Reformation had it right, and Samuel Rutherford, in his volume Lex Rex, the law is king. The question, of course, is which law? Is it a man-made law? Is it Lex Talionis, which is to say the law of God? And in that system, it is to say equity and justice. Only there, I would suggest I would suggest it simply because it's revealed. It's revealed in the scriptures that the law of God is the basis of equity and justice. If you have any legal system apart from it, you have injustice and wrong and abuse. And you have, of course, elevated in all such systems, you have either private parties acting as kings, monarchs, regulators, and bosses and chiefs, and lords, or you have the modern state. The modern state seems to have replaced, with its impersonal corporatism, the abuse of individuals that have long been part of the human condition, right, under the sin problem. But I was mentioning a moment ago John Hooper, who was a bishop And I want to just say briefly something about his death and why it's important. You'll say, well, the Fox's Book of Martyrs, that's fine, that's old history, but the Fox's Book of Martyrs is one you should have. I would say somehow try to get an original edition. There have been many editions that have been sort of redacted to the purposes of the publisher, either to highlight one thing or dim something else. And if you could get the original edition, that would be best. He preached very faithfully in the scriptures. His sermons, according to the custom manners, he corrected sin and sharply inveighed against the iniquity of the world and the corrupt abuses of the church. Now, this was during the time of King Edward, the young King Josiah, as he was called. The people in great flocks and companies came daily to hear his voice as the most melodious sound and tune of Orpheus's harp, insomuch that oftentimes when he was preaching, the church would be so full that none could enter farther than the doors thereof. In his doctrine, he was earnest, in tongue eloquent, in the scriptures perfect, in pains indefatigable, in his life exemplary. But he lost his place when the Catholics came back in charge with a vengeance in the person of Queen Mary, and he was degraded, he was condemned, and efforts were made while he was in prison to get him to change his mind. As Christ was tempted, so they tempted him, and then maliciously reported that he had recanted. The place of his martyrdom being fixed in Gloucester, he rejoiced very much, lifting up his eyes and hands to heaven, and praising God that he saw it good to send him among the people over whom he was pastor, there to confirm with his death the truth which he had taught before them. So he was destroyed. He was to be destroyed among his own people. Sir Anthony Kingston, at one time Dr. Hooper's good friend, was appointed by the Queen's letters to attend to his execution. As soon as he saw the bishop, he burst into tears with tender entreaties. Yes, this is David Tulis, and you are free to call me anytime. And caller, you're live on the David Tulis Show. What's on your mind?
Can we learn anything from this? In other words, can we apply this to modern day where more Kennedy documents were released yesterday, and you and I think, are the same age or close to it. And I remember when Kennedy was shot and sitting in front of the TV and watching his funeral. I remember it vividly. And quite obviously, the federal government of the United States of America covered up parts of this, and that's coming out with more documentation being released. And it's the empire, like the empires back then. What can we learn from that? And it appears that, whether you want to say there was one shooter, and I know I'm going off topic a little bit, but
that's fine.
Not, or 3 or 10 shooters, that there was some sort of cover-up. And what can we do to purge this entire system of all of its corruption? What do we need? I mean, Trump is the beginning, but what do we need to do to purge it of all the evil satanic enemies of God and America and individuals in order to get back to a republic?
Well, do you think we can do anything about that, Mike?
Is there anything we can learn from the Reformation and apply that to modern day America so we can become a better people and a better country? And I'll listen on the air, David.
Well, I really appreciate that, Mike. Thanks. The question is that Mike is asking is, well, here we have the opening of the Kennedy papers. Not all of them. I think there's 600 documents that are being withheld for a few days. But what is the abuses that we have today? How can we call on the claims of the Reformation, the claims of godly government, and shine a light and explain this killing of President John F. Kennedy in Texas in his open motorcade? Well, we have secret government, and one thing that the Reformation brought, Mike, and I'm glad you're bringing this up. I'm trying to get to that point, but we have democratic government, and we have Lex Rex, as Samuel Rutherford said. We have rule of law, and if you have rule of law and you have an open government where government is accountable to the people and to God, you can't have a deep state. You cannot have a secret. You cannot have a secret government. James Bovard, writing this morning at LeRockwell.com, tells about the FBI. And the FBI has always been a corrupt organization. It has been very much involved in abuses of dissidents, abuses of members of Congress. It has intimidated everybody who comes into its view. And remember, COINTELPRO was designed to hassle black activists, the Black Panthers. It was designed to hassle people in the anti-war movement. people who were espousing free market in narcotics. All of those people were victimized by the government illegally and unlawfully. And we have the FISA court today. We have a deep state by design. It's inevitable whenever you have a system that gets too big. You can't. When systems become too big, they become totally impersonal. And then there are large parts of those systems which are outside of public view. Right? They're outside of law. They're not accountable. And the killing of President Kennedy was a rejection of the Reformation, because the Reformation requires men be subject to God first, and that their actions be in public. Right? You can't have secret government. You cannot have secret councils, secret trials, secret charges. And secret indictments. That it's just simply not allowed. Everything is done in the open. In the scriptures that the Reformation rediscovered said you can't have secret executions, for example. And here's why. In old Israel, executions were a public matter, and the witnesses of the capital offense were the first ones to throw the stone. Right? You had to have two witnesses, except in case of rape of a woman in a field. In that case, it was her word alone could bring the death penalty. But ordinarily, you had to have two witnesses. In Israel, the execution was public, and the witnesses threw the first stones, and everybody in the city threw a stone on the body of the dead man. Right? At some point, he's dead pretty quickly. And in the end, his death is marked by a pile of stones, because everyone had a hand in it. Right? It's public. It's not private. And so when you have the deep state and you have the modern state, the idea of the kind of the corporate religious corporation, well, the religious corporation, which is the state, you have things done in secret, not in the open. And Christianity and the Reformation say, no, we have to have democratic government where the people are represented by their courts, right? They elect the judges. There is a court. There is a ministry of the sword, and that sword is wielded for a limited purpose, to oppress evil. And nothing else. And of course, the modern state rejects the Reformation on that point. It says that the ministry of the sword is to be involved in education, in the care of widows, the care of the poor, the care of childless women, of women with children who are bastards. Right? All those people deserve care of government. We have liberty under law from the Reformation, and now we don't have liberty under law. We just have law. We have rule of law, which doesn't mean what you think. In our day, rule of law means simply that the law grinds down the poor in the judicial industrial complex. The Reformation is against the judicial industrial complex, and it's for the court. Right? There is a court. We have them here. We have circuit, chancery. We have criminal and civil divisions of circuit court. We have a court of appeals. Those are intended by God and by the Reformation to serve justice, not to serve the law, but to serve justice. And the scriptures see a minimal presence of man-made law, and that's why in Israel there was no executive branch. There was a head, there was a Moses, there was a Joshua, there were judges who were executives, but there was no lawmaking body. Why? Because the law already existed, right? It was written in everybody's hearts, and everybody knew what it was. Why do I want to mention the death of Bishop Hooper? Well, he was glad to have died among his people, charged, of course, with heresy. And on February 9, 1555, he was led forth, and many thousands of persons were collected, as it was market day. All the way being straitly charged not to speak, and beholding the people, he mourned bitterly, who mourned bitterly for him. He would sometimes lift up his eyes toward heaven and look very cheerfully upon such as he knew. And he was never known during the time of his being among them to look so cheerful and ruddy of countenance as he did at that time. When he came to the place appointed where he should die, he smilingly beheld the stake and preparation made for him, which was near unto the great elm tree over against the college of the priests where he used to preach. Now, after he had entered into prayer, a box was brought and laid before him upon a stool with his pardon from the queen, if he would turn. Okay, you just turn and you have your life. Reject what you have said and you have your life. At the sight whereof he cried, if you love my soul, away with it. The box being taken away, Lord Chandois said, seeing there is no remedy, dispatch him quickly. Command was now given that the fire should be kindled, but because there were not more green faggots than 2 horses could carry, it kindled not speedily, and it was a pretty while before it took the reeds upon the faggots. At length it burned about him, but the wind having full strength at that place, and being a lowering cold morning, it blew the flame from him, so that he was in a manner little more than touched by the fire. Within a space after, a few dry faggots were brought, and a new fire kindled with faggots, for there were now no more reeds, and those burned at the nether parts, but had small power above, because of the wind, saving that it burnt his hair and scorched his skin a little. In the time of which fire, even as at the first flame, he prayed, saying mildly and not very loud, but as one without pain, O Jesus, Son of David, have mercy upon me, and receive my soul. After the second fire was spent, he wiped both his eyes with his hands, and beholding the people, he said, with an indifferent, loud voice, for God's love, good people, let me have more fire. And all this, while his nether parts did burn. But the faggots were so few that the flame only singed his upper part. So they built a third fire, which was more extreme than the other two. In this fire, he prayed with a loud voice. And these were the last words that he was heard to utter. But when he was black in the mouth and his tongue so swollen that he could not speak, yet his lips went until they were shrunk to the gums. And he knocked his breast with his hands until one of his arms fell off, and then knocked still with the other, while the fat, water, and blood dripping out of his fingers' ends, until by renewing the fire his strength was gone, and his hand clave fast in knocking to the iron upon his breast. And then immediately bowing forwards, he yielded up his spirit. Thus was he 3/4 of an hour or more in the fire, ever as a lamb. Patiently he abode the extremity thereof, John Fox says, neither moving forwards, backwards, nor to any side. But he died as quietly as a child in his bed, and he now reigneth, I doubt not, as a blessed martyr in the joys of heaven, prepared for the faithful in Christ before the foundations of the world, for whose constancy all Christians are bound loudly to praise. And that's from Fox's Book of Martyrs. I think what we want to mention is, as Christians will be gathering tomorrow at Memorial Auditorium at 7 o'clock, it's $25 to get in if you're an adult. And if you have a student ID, it's $10. The singing will be from Keith and Kristen Getty. And it will be an event sponsored by several local churches, a celebration of the Reformation. I think the thing that perhaps is most significant in my area of work as a journalist here in Chattanooga, where I cover local economy and the free markets, is the idea of limitations upon power. And that's important because Christianity envisions a great free area of society, right? It's all about freedom. It's freedom from sin first. That's the Christian promise, that you will not be enslaved to your sins. But then also freedom among men, right? In the collective of men, where there is the magistrate with his sword, there is the court, there is the sheriff, all of which are lawful bodies. There is a great free market. Christianity envisions a contest, right? Wherever Christians are, those especially inspired by the Reformation, there are guns nearby. Christians have, since the time of the Reformation, always been people. They are militant in defense of the innocent. They're militant in defense of their rights. The colonies at the time of the late 1600s and 1700s, they were offended by very slight claims against them by the crown. Very, very slight claims indeed, and they went to war for it. Perhaps there's a hidden story there, and if you are a revisionist in history, as I tend to be, there, you can say that the event in Philadelphia was in fact a coup against the colonies and against the people of the future United States, to deliver them to a centralized and consolidated power. That's what Hamilton wanted, and the Constitution, we can say in God's providence, has brought us to that. We are here in a quasi-totalitarian, authoritarian state because of the Constitution. It brought us here because it allowed for a centralization of power. But Christianity has always been against that, and I think many of the founders, especially the Anti-Federalists, were aware of that danger, and they fought against it, and they lost, right? They lost. The southern states seeking their own independence under similar political grounds lost as well to power. Abraham Kuyper was a Dutch statesman who gave some important lectures in Princeton in, I think, 1901. And he has a wonderful book, Lectures on Calvinism. And he says every state formation, every assertion of the power of the magistrate, every mechanical means of compelling order and of guaranteeing a safe course of life is therefore always something unnatural, right? And that's, well, here's why. Something against which the deeper aspirations of our nature rebel, and which, on this very account, may become the source both of a dreadful abuse of power on the part of those who exercise it, and of a continuous revolt on the part of the multitude. Thus originated the battle of the ages between authority and liberty. And in this battle, it was the very innate thirst for liberty which proved itself the God-ordained means to bridle the authority wheresoever it degenerated into despotism. And the Reformation, I think, as far as its political implications, in other words, its implications for law, it is there that we have the spirit of defiance, right? The spirit of anger against abuse, the spirit that all across the country is raising cries against policing, modern policing. And we will be having here, by the way, at Nooga Radio at 11 with Cindy Deering, David Roddy, the chief of police, and she will give him a very nice conversation. But the idea of policing and the abuses worldwide of police departments, security forces, spying departments, and FBIs, these are part of that battle. Christianity has always been the system of thought in life which says, no, we will not tase innocent people. We will not shoot men who make a phone call asking for help with a son who is has a pistol and who is drunk. Right? We will not kill that son with our threats. We will not invade foreign countries. Do you know that the Americans have troops in 53 of 54 countries in Africa? Did you know that? Lindsey Graham, the Republican warmonger, was surprised to hear about the troops in Niger, where not long ago 4 American soldiers were killed. The idea that this country is an empire like that, ostensibly fighting Muslim terrorism, is part of the argument against the Reformation. Right, the whole American apparatus, the whole purpose of modern statecraft, as against local economy, as against the rights of Chattanoogans and Tennesseans, is based on an argument against the Reformation. So we know the Reformation matters because there are people who are still fighting against it. They're fighting against restraint under law. They're fighting against the restraining of the hand, right? The hand with the weapon, the hand with the grenade, the hand with the nuclear bomb, the sniper scope, the hand with the handcuffs. That is what the Reformation is about. And so the Reformation, which has blessed us here in Chattanooga greatly, is still alive. And I think in the fight for the free market, we can see the same impulse, right? Democratic, favoring the common man, recognizing individual conscience, recognizing the individual right of self-expression. Those all come from the Reformation. Those all come from Calvinism, as Abraham Kuyper argues in his lectures at Princeton. Well, this is David Tulis. I'm arguing that near is better than far, small than big, simple than complex. And in the footnotes, where I always write with sans serif type, probably Helvetica. The serifs, of course, are the swords that statutes have on their letters. I argue that personal is better than corporate and that physical is better than abstract. Support Nooganomics and subscribe to Nooganomics.com.
Traffic, news, and information. Nooga Radio. Digital FM 95.3 HD4 and 92.7 FM.